rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This is the special meeting of Town Council, Wednesday, April 5th, 2017. It's 8:30 p.m. Before we begin, I just want to thank all members of council who are present this evening for making themselves available for this special meeting to get this important project done. We realized that the April 10th meeting was fairly doomed based upon it being scheduled on a school vacation week, and quorum was unlikely, so that meeting is canceled, and this meeting is essentially in lieu of that meeting to deal with any important and necessary business, which we do have on the agenda this evening. For purposes of roll call, Mr. Rooney is not present this evening. He was unable to make it. Mr. Vavrick is also not present. We are going to move right into the consent calendar. Are there any comments to the consent calendar? Mr. Kellogg.
So just on the EMS contract item, on the bottom of page 4, the motion to amend the amendment. I believe there were two things that were changed in the contract. One was the relative to the audited town copies. There was also the insertion of the term EMT in front of EMTP and MICP, but of course I don't have that contract in front of me, so I don't know exactly where that was placed.
All right, so your amendment is just to,
So it is to
the
add
motion to amend is to add the appropriate amendments.
the appropriate language to the amendment. And
Okay.
then on all of page 5, I would just like to globally replace VMS with VEMS to just clarify the correct acronym for the company.
Okay. Any objections to those changes? All right, any other comments? All right, seeing none, I'll pass the consent calendar noting those requested changes by Mr. Kellogg. Moving on to communications, we'll just ask that the communications be incorporated into the minutes of this meeting, and I will waive the reading of those communications. Public participation. Any members of the public wish to participate? All right, seeing none, I'll close public participation. There are two appointments on our agenda. LNA had to interview both of them. Unfortunately, Ms. Lampley just didn't get the word about the meeting this evening. It was miscommunication, so we apologize to her about that. We'll be sure that she's on the next on the agenda, and for certain the next council agenda. Mr. Lisi did appear this evening, so Mr. Kellogg, if you would, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that Paul Lisi, Republican, be appointed to the Planning and Zoning Commission for a term ending November 26th, 2019.
Motion by Mr. Kellogg, second by Ms. LaPellis. Discussion, Mr. Kellogg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Paul Lisi currently serves as an alternate on the Planning and Zoning Commission. Prior to his service on the P&Z Commission, Mr. Lisi served on the Zoning Board of Appeals. He's a 22-year resident of Monroe and is a licensed architect and building official. He currently works as a partner and principal for Antonazzi Associates. This appointment will move him from an alternate to a full member on the commission to replace Jeremy Hayden.
Thank you, Mr. Kellogg. Any comments, Mr.
I just didn't hear the first part. Was there a term ending date on the appointment?
November 26, 2019.
2019?
Well, it's a midterm appointment, so.
So that would not be,
It
yeah.
would, the appointment would
It
expire
would expire.
upon the next municipal election, so that individual would have to run the next
And
municipal election.
we did ask.
We did ask that,
Mr.
he's
Lisi
aware
if he
of
was-
it.
and had
So it's going to be on the
intention.
ballot this November?
Correct.
Great.
For the record, Mr. Lisi, because it's an elected position, it was interviewed by LNA as a commission precedent to his vote this evening, and he was approved for consideration by council 3-0. Anything further? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? Against, motion carries 8-0. Thank you very much. Action items. A is the Town Council Committee on Finance, Health, Education, Health, and Public Safety. Mr. Pellis?
Yes, there's really only one report. I had asked Mr. Hungsberger, of course, myself, in case there were any, we're trying to streamline this by having written reports. So the only person who did write back to me is Ken Kellogg, who wrote, EMS Commission met 3/29, and Board of Health is meeting tonight. Nothing to report that requires Town Council action at this time. And I could tell you that FEPS has not met since the last time, and that's it.
Okay. Moving on. Again, just for the record, I just want to just remind council, one of the things that I think has been happening with our subcommittee reports is we're just kind of getting a little bit off tangent with the reports and reporting on current events and things that are not germane to council business. I think we've been doing a really good job of streamlining our efforts on the subcommittees to report on those matters that we think are germane to council business. And I just want to remind everybody to please try and do that with their reports to the extent they can. Moving on to action item B is Planning and Zoning, Public Works, Parks and Recreation. Mr. Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have not met since the last report at the last council meeting.
Okay, C is LMA, Mr. O'Rourke.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. We met this evening prior to town council session where we discussed the Stephanie Roof contract and addressed the appointment of Paul Lisi to planning and zoning.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Rourke. Strategic planning is D, Mr. Kellogg.
No meetings since our last council meeting. I'm looking to schedule a meeting for the week after next.
Thank you, Mr. Kellogg. EMS Facility Work Group, EU.
No meeting, no report since our last council meeting.
First Selectman's not present this evening. I don't have any written report from him. Moving on to unfinished business. Chalk Hill updates. I did indicate to council we keep this on. We discussed at our last meeting. Mr. Kapoor, Dick mentioned his request to keep Chalk Hill on there and gear it towards, well, assuming that at the time we didn't have the results of the budget referendum. Now that we know that the budget has passed, I'm going to refer this immediately to strategic planning. It's been in strategic planning, but I will ask Mr. Kellogg to focus the immediate review of Chalk Hill on the amount of money that's in the budget and essentially how far that gets Chalk Hill and how it impacts programming in town. And at the same time, hopefully that continues. It's a springboard for the long-term solution that we hope will be discussed. So,
Understood.
if there's any other comments on that, I appreciate you taking that on. Moving on to new business. A is the Stepney Roof Plus. Do we have a motion? A resolution?
Yes. I move to adopt the following resolution as written and incorporated into the body of the resolution. The resolution states, resolution regarding an appropriation and bond authorization of $2,650,000 for the Stepney Elementary School roof replacement project. Okay, so I'm just going to read the resolution because sometimes we have questions from bond counsel, etc. Be it resolved that the sum of $2,650,000 be appropriated for the cost of the Stepney Elementary School roof replacement project. Such project to include the replacement of the roof of the Stepney Elementary School in the town of Monroe in all sections except the cafeteria, fascia, and soffit replacement. Seal expansion joints and block, paint exterior white wall panels and alterations, repairs and improvements in connection therewith, as well as engineering, architectural, temporary, and permanent financing costs. And to meet said appropriation and in lieu of a tax therefore, bonds of the town be issued pursuant to Chapter 109 of the Connecticut General Statutes as amended, or any other provision of law thereto enabling in the amount of $2,650,000, or so much thereof as may be necessary after deducting grants or other sources of funds available therefore, which bond shall be general obligations of the town to which its full faith and credit is pledged, and that the first selectman and the treasurer be authorized to issue and sell such bonds and determine the amount, date of maturity, interest rate, form, and other details of such bonds pursuant to Chapter 109 of the Connecticut General Statutes as amended, or any other provision or of law thereto enabling, and that the first selectman and the treasurer shall sign the bonds by either manual or facsimile signatures, and that the law firm of Pullman and Conley, LLC, is designated as bond counsel to approve the legality of the bonds, and that the first selectman and the treasurer be authorized to issue and sell temporary notes of the town in an amount not to exceed $2,650,000 in anticipation of the receipt of the proceeds from the sale of such bonds, and to determine the amount, date of maturity, interest rate, form, and other details of such notes pursuant to Chapter 109 of the Connecticut General Statutes as amended, or any other provision of law thereto enabling, provided that the proceeds from the sale of such notes shall be used for said purpose, and that the first selectman, the treasurer, or either of them is authorized to designate a bank or trust company to be the certifying bank, registrar, transfer agent, and paying agent of the bonds, to sell the bonds and notes at public or private sale or negotiation, to deliver the bonds and notes, to perform and comply with all requirements of the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 as amended, and to perform all other acts and execute such documents which are necessary or appropriate to issue the bonds and notes, including but not limited to the execution and delivery of a bond purchase agreement, tax compliance agreement, and bond issuance insurance agreement, and that the first selectman, treasurer, and director of finance, or any one of them, are hereby authorized on behalf of the town to enter into agreements or otherwise covenant for the benefit of bondholders as may be necessary, appropriate, or desirable to effect the sale of the bonds and notes authorized by this resolution, including agreements to provide information on an annual or other periodic basis to nationally recognized municipal securities information repositories or state-based information repositories, and to provide notices to the repositories of material events as enumerated in Securities and Exchange Commission Exchange Act Rule 15C2-12 as amended, and that the town reasonably expects to incur expenditures in connection with the capital project for which a general functional description is provided above. The town reasonably expects to reimburse itself for the cost of the expenditures with the proceeds of bonds, notes, or other obligations of the town described above. The maximum principal amount of debt is not expected to exceed $2,650,000. This declaration of official intent is a declaration of official intent made pursuant to Treasury Regulation Section 1.150-2.
Thank you, Mr. Pellis. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Reed. For discussion, I'll just start the discussion off just by detailing what happened in LNA this evening and refreshing council's memory as to what happened at our last meeting. LNA met this evening. Essentially where we left off in our review last meeting was that we had asked Mr. Agustin to answer two what we thought were very important questions on LNA. One being the bidders that were selected, and just to confirm how that process worked. Essentially, Garland was selected as a general contractor through a formal bidding process, and Garland then selected certain subcontractors who, in their professional opinion, were appropriate subcontractors who had the capacity and the timing was available for them to complete this project. And we wanted clarification on as to what contractors Garland selected and why. And the second question that came up was that the proposed low bidder for the roof portion of the project, Silktown Roofing, Miss Martin had remembered had been potentially engaged in litigation with the town of Monroe, and we wanted further clarification and confirmation of that. Since that time, Mr. Agustin and Mr. Patello, who's present this evening, did provide answers to both of those questions, both individually from Mr. Patello regarding the first question and through Mr. Agustin regarding the second question. It was determined that it was confirmed that Silktown was indeed engaged in a dispute a legal dispute with the town of Monroe relative to the Massac Roof project. It was further confirmed that subsequent to that dispute, which was settled with the town of Monroe, that Silktown did perform a few odd and end maintenance projects in town, and based upon that information, I did contact each of the council members individually, as well as the chairman of the Board of Finance, to ask for their informal direction as to how they felt about Silktown and the prior litigation with the town of Monroe, albeit ambiguous in nature as to whether or not there was a valid claim for malfeasance or the like. I think council was unanimous, as well as Mr. Manjos, that there just wasn't a comfort level with that subcontractor being selected, and as a result, Mr. Patello, through Mr. Agustin, did reach out to the second lowest bidder, Barrett Roofing, I don't know their formal name, who happened to be $2,000 more than Silktown, to make sure that they were available timing-wise to do the job. Mr. Patello did confirm in LNA that he felt that all three of the contractors that were selected and invited to bid on the job were qualified to perform the work, and in that Barrett was qualified to perform the work. You'll see that contract number 3.3 is the contract that considers the roofing work. It's the majority of the money that's being spent on the project. If you go to scope Exhibit A, which is a scope of work, it does highlight on the last page the price of the 3 competitive bids that were received, and it does highlight the $2,468,144 number, which was Silktown's bid. That number plus the $25,000 contingency gives us the $2,493,144 number, which was used as essentially the not-to-exceed number in the body of the contract between the town of Monroe and Garland as the general contractor. We did confirm in L&A that that price would be honored by Barrett, so there is essentially no monetary difference with respect to the contract. I just wanted to point out to council that the Exhibit A does highlight Silktown, and I just want to make sure that the vote on this motion is such that the contract is approved only on the condition that Barrett Incorporated is selected as the roofing subcontractor. I want to point out that contracts 1 and 2, while Barrett and Silktown did bid on that work, it's essentially painting work, and there's a different contractor that's been selected for those 2 jobs. So essentially the pricing is the same, the not to exceed number works with the contingency. Mr. Patello did send me a letter. The original was in the mailbox sitting up here for me this evening, March 29, 2017, rated into the minutes as E under communications. I just want to read it to council on the record. It says, Chairman Lito, please accept this letter in response to the town council's questions regarding how the U.S. Communities Program was used to provide the town of Monroe with a turnkey proposal for the Stepney Elementary project. As a backup to this letter, I included a white paper that explains how the town's participation in the U.S. Communities Program allows them to cooperate with the lead public agency's competitive public bid and award of a master agreement to Garland DBS in satisfying the town's competitive bid requirements. Additionally, it details Garland DBS's project delivery process in developing a proposal based upon the U.S. Communities Roofing Supplies and Related Products and Services Master Agreement. As you are aware, Garland DBS used this program for Massac, Fawn Hollow, and also a portion of the Stepney roof in 2013 and 2014. All projects were completed on time, under budget, and with exceptional results. During a town council meeting after the projects were completed, I was very pleased to hear that a member of your town council suggested that the town use these projects and my daily oversight electronic reporting as a standard for all future projects to fulfill your Rule 27, which is now Rule 26. The Stepney project is very complex. It involves roofing, metal framing, wall panel cladding, soffit work, painting, and masonry waterproofing. As a general contractor, GDI obtains competitive quotes from multiple contractors to ensure that all of the above-mentioned work could be completed safely, on time, and with a high quality of workmanship. As per the requirements of the U.S. Communities Master Agreement, the town receives a direct benefit of the competitive quotes GDI obtained for this project. We selected subcontractors based on their availability, past experience, and capabilities to complete the Stepney project with its complexities and strict timelines. Since GDI takes on all of the contractual responsibilities to provide the town with a successful project, we selected subcontractors that we believe to be best qualified to complete the work. Please review the attached information. We look forward to continuing our relationship with the town of Monroe, Connecticut. Should you have any further questions, please feel free to contact me. Respectfully, Steve Patello. I did pass, for the record, I did pass this letter to all members of council who had an opportunity to review it. And if anybody has any questions, Mr. Patello is present, Mr. Zamri is present, Mr. Agustin is present this evening, but I think that essentially summarizes where we are. Mr. Agustin.
Just a quick comment. In the resolution that was read into the record, I want to point out in the first sentence, in the second line, where it starts with such project, I think it's worded correctly, and I think it says what it's supposed to say, but it depends on where you put the emphasis at the comma. But such project to include the replacement of the roof at Stepney Elementary School in the town of Monroe, the town, in all sections except the cafeteria. And then it says fascia, safe, soffit replacement, and all of those other components. All of those are included in the project. It's tricky wording. I think it's done correctly. But I just want to point out that the only thing that's excluded from the project is the cafeteria roof.
Okay. Thank you. Any further discussion? Comments? Mr. Agustin, Mr. Zamri, Mr. Patello, anything that you feel is necessary to add to the conversation? No. Again, I said this in LNA, I just want to thank those three gentlemen and Mr. Blasi, who was here in LNA, for just very, very, very thorough and quick work that was done to fully investigate the questions and claims that were made and to address it swiftly. I have to say I wasn't very confident that we would be here just a few days after identifying this problem, but I just want to point out again, and again, thank LNA for very, very good questions that I think served as an appropriate check and balance for this type of situation. It was identified, it was dealt with, and the project moves on, and I'm happy that we were able to resolve it. Mr. Agustin.
And we very much appreciate the fact that you take an extra night out to do a special meeting to make the project move forward. Thank you.
It's a school night, too.
With that said, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor and against, that motion carries 8-0. There's one more motion. Do I have a motion that contingent upon Board of Finance approval that a town meeting will be warned and held on April 27th at 2017 at 7:00 p.m. in the Monroe Town Council chambers of this town hall to consider and act upon the bond resolution that was just approved, and that the town clerk shall cause legal notice of such meeting to be posted and published in accordance with the law.
So moved.
So motion by Mr. Lapellis, is there a second?
Second.
Second by, is that you, Mr. Kapoor? And any further discussion? All those in favor? And against, that motion carries 8-0. Second, public participation. All right, seeing none, I'll close the second public participation. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So
Mr.
moved.
Hansberger, second by Mr. Lapellis. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thanks again, everybody, for coming out this evening. I appreciate it.
Yeah.